Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our live coverage of the latest mission from here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. I'm Will Robinson Smith. I'll be providing our commentary for the duration of this coverage. We are broadcasting, as we always do, from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at KSC. Spaceflight Now editor Stephen Young is running the technical operations of the broadcast this evening. Adam Bernstein is out in the field preparing to track the rocket, also doing some still photography as well. Michael Caine has the evening off as he's preparing to shoot the eclipse out in Texas. Hopefully, knock on wood, not going to get clouded out on Monday. And a best of luck to all of our friends who are going to be chasing the path of totality, those Umbrophiles, as I learned some folks like to call themselves, the fanatical totality chasers for the eclipse. Best of luck to all of you. If you'd like to follow our photography team here at Spaceflight Now, you can find them on X. Anna Bernstein is at ABurnNYC. Michael Caine at MT Caine Jr. And of course, be sure to follow Spaceflight Now on all our social channels. If you're not already, we're on X, Threads, Facebook, just about everywhere you can think of. We have a presence there, and of course, right here on YouTube. Your T-minus 56 minutes, 55 seconds and counting to the launch of SpaceX's first rideshare mission of this variety. This is Bandwagon-1. 11 satellites on board the Falcon 9 rocket you see there at the heart of Launch Complex 39A. Your T-minus 56 minutes, 36 seconds from liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket. The T0 time is 7:16 p.m. Eastern, 23:16 UTC. If for whatever reason SpaceX is not able to launch today, they do have backup opportunities tomorrow at the same time. Very appreciative you decided to join us this afternoon for our live launch coverage. If you haven't done so already, be sure to hit the like button and share the stream to allow more folks to find this live coverage as we continue on through the next hour with everyone. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to Spaceflight Now here on YouTube. It's free and easy to do so, and we are inching ever so close to 200,000 subscribers, and we'd love to get to that nice round number. Once you do subscribe, be sure to hit the bell icon, turn on all notifications. That way you get alerted whenever we do start these live streams, so you never miss a stream, and when we publish new videos here on the channel. We're also powered by a wonderful channel member community here on YouTube. So thanks to folks like Gavin Martin, Cindy, Marlene, Gustke, Callistia Lee, Sharon Trotter, Mel Roberts Harold, Glenn A., and many others. Thank you so much for your ongoing support. Josh King, Jason as well. Hello to you. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, shop.spaceflightnow.com. Access to member-only videos here on YouTube, and of course, the ability to watch all of our Cape-based live coverage in 4K. A couple more channel members cruising on in here. Butterfly, Corey B., hello to the both of you. Welcome in. And our thanks to channel member Rick Donner for getting us off on a good foot, gifting 10 Spaceflight Now memberships. So if you are one of our newest channel members, first off, welcome aboard. Glad to have you with us. Be sure to thank Rick in the live chat. We hope you enjoy the perks of channel membership. Last but not least, you can also support what we do here at Spaceflight Now and join the conversation by using the YouTube Super Chat feature, as Bill Suckton just did with a 10-pound Super Chat. Thank you so much for that, Bill. Really appreciate you starting us off on a good foot here on the Super Chat front. Bill said this is a contribution to the Coffee and Cookie Fund. I think we're still in Girl Scout cookie season, so might be a bad idea to investigate what they have on store, or in stock, I should say. In all seriousness, though, the Super Chats and channel memberships help us to continuously improve the quality and frequency of our live streams, so certainly appreciate that. It also helps us do some good on-the-ground reporting in addition to just here at Florida's Space Coast. Of course, if you were with us for our coverage last night, did mention some of the highlights from Elon Musk's Starship briefing, talking about the successes of Flight 3, looking forward to the future of the program. Flight 4 could be just around the corner, potentially as early as next month. And so your support helps us do those robust Starship integrated flight test live streams in partnership with our friends at Lab Padre. And we'll look forward to bringing you live coverage on the ground of Flight 4 whenever it comes about. For now, though, we do have a mission ahead of us with the Bandwagon-1 flight. Unfortunately, we have a pretty stellar weather outlook for today. Taking a look at the wide shot here with the NASA countdown clock in the foreground. Weather pretty optimal for a launch this evening. The 45th Weather Squadron, based here at the Cape, forecast a better than 95% chance of favorable weather today, with the only potential watch item being the thick cloud layers rule. It appears that the clouds have been pushing offshore this afternoon, going into the early evening. Liftoff winds trending between 10 and 12 miles per hour. And all the additional risk criteria, keeping it in the low category for upper level wind shear, booster recovery weather, and solar activity. T-minus 50 minutes, 42 seconds and counting. In about 12 or so minutes, that'll be the point when the launch director for this mission will give their go-ahead for the start of propellant load, assuming that SpaceX is ready to do so. They do have the option to take that poll a little bit early if they're in a good position, but about T-minus 38 minutes is the nominal time when that poll is taken. If you haven't been with us for a recent Falcon flight, SpaceX not providing mission audio ahead of the final 5 minutes of the count, 10 minutes in this case, but given that this is a customer mission, there may be some copyright music and some additional commentary that may be hard to navigate around. So what we'll likely do for this flight is go ahead and listen into the SpaceX broadcast, and if there's any relevant callouts as far as, knock on wood, but if there were to be a scrub call, or as we're hearing some of those fueling milestones being called out, we will relay those to you as we step on through the count. We do have extensive experience in covering SpaceX and their Falcon 9 flights, though, so we will guide you through the visual cues we're looking for and the fueling milestones as we step in through this mission timeline. SpaceX is running its countdown from its Hangar X site here at KSC, the facility where they refurbish their Falcon boosters and prepare them for future flights, as is the case with the booster you see here on your screen, getting ready to launch less than 50 minutes from now. This is booster tail number B1073. It's going for its 14th flight today, and we'll talk a little bit more about that flight history in just a bit here. SpaceX also has support for this launch in part from the control room at its headquarters in Hawthorne, California. Again, we are ticking down to a liftoff time of 7:16 p.m. Eastern, 23:16 UTC. Taking a look here at the live chat, T-minus 46 minutes, 28 seconds and counting. Want to thank our wonderful moderators for helping to keep things kosher in the live chat. So thanks to Astro Jen, Astro Joe, Stephanie B, Rusty Shackelford. Really appreciate the four of you for helping us out with the broadcast. Very much appreciated. Also, thanks to Astro Joe in particular for gifting a Spaceflight Now membership. Thank you so much, Astro Joe, for that. Also to one of our other channel members, Callisti Lee, for gifting 10 Spaceflight Now memberships. Really appreciate that. And Astro Jen, also gifting a Spaceflight Now membership. So if you are one of our newest channel members, be sure to thank the three of them in the live chat if you haven't already. And our thanks also extend to Robert C. for a $10 super chat. Thank you, Robert. Who says, once again, thanks for all the great coverage. Beautiful weather here in Brevard. Can't wait to see another great launch. Been here 40 years and they never get old. God bless Elon and the engineers. I'm envious of the number of launches you've seen having lived here for 40 years. I unfortunately miss getting to cover the space shuttle era, but it's certainly great being a part of spaceflight coverage community now. Thanks also to channel member Bob Witter for a $10 super chat. Thank you so much, Bob. Says your coverage is always great. Thank you. Waiting for a great view from Ocala. Well, it certainly looks like the clouds will cooperate for views from just about all of Central Florida tonight, so hopefully Ocala is among those. T-minus 44 minutes, 41 seconds and counting. Taking a look at the trajectory for today's mission. Falcon 9 rocket's going to be lifting off, of course, from pad 39A here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. This is a somewhat northeasterly trajectory, though not quite as aggressively northeast as, say, a mission heading up to the International Space Station. But similar to an ISS mission, we will see that booster make its way back to landing zone 1 after liftoff. So if you are in the Central Florida area, especially here in Brevard County, don't be surprised if you hear a sonic boom as the booster makes its way back down for touchdown at landing zone 1, LZ1, over at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. A little bit after 7 minutes into the flight. Because of the payloads that are on board of the Bandwagon-1 mission, SpaceX is going to be cutting its feed right after the point of first stage landing. So as far as what we're getting from SpaceX, it'll be a bit of a truncated broadcast today. While SpaceX hasn't said explicitly why, I think a logical conclusion of that would be the fact that this is supporting part of KoreaSat's Project 425 satellite constellation. These are synthetic aperture radar satellites, or SAR satellites, for their government. And the last time SpaceX launched with a batch of, or a couple of Project 425 satellites, they did the same thing where didn't get full views of deployment. So unfortunately also that means we don't have a good timeline for the deployment of the other 10 payloads, but hopefully we'll get confirmation from SpaceX via social media as deployment occurs. So be sure to check our social media for updates on that as deployment goes along. We're now T-minus 41 minutes, 13 seconds and counting to the launch of this Falcon 9 rocket. Just a few minutes from now is when the launch director will give their go-ahead for the start of prop load. In the meantime, want to thank the more than 4,500 of you that are joining us with our live coverage this afternoon. We'd love it if you could help us out by hitting the like button. Allow more folks to find their way in as we are cruising into the final 40 here. Also, thank you to Thrash Life for a $10 super chat. Thank you so much, Thrash. Who says, always love the great commentary. Just joking when I say we all know what MaxQ means. Cheers watching from Denver. Always good to have our friends from Colorado joining us, and hopefully those in Colorado who are getting ready for Space Symposium coverage there on the ground will also have a fruitful and productive week as well. We're now T-minus 38 minutes, 43 seconds and counting. About a minute away from the point at which they'll take the poll on the start of prop load here. As part of its efforts toward maximum reusability, SpaceX, of course, will attempt to recover the payload fairings following fairing separation on this flight. They splash down under parachutes into the Atlantic Ocean waters on this mission. And recovery vessel Doug pulling double duty after picking up the fairing halves from the recently flown Starlink 6-47 mission, which launched off of Pad 40. It's been heading up north to get in position to launch or to recover the payload fairings from this mission as well. So we'll see a very full Doug cruise back into Port Canaveral after it's done with this operation today. SpaceX saves about $6 million per recovery. This is what that operation looks like, hoisting them out of the water and onto the recovery vessel. This image taken from a recovery operation last year. And as we're just about a minute or so away from the start of propellant load, assuming that SpaceX is ready to do so, now's a good time as any to talk about the countdown timeline here. Of course, that process will currently T-minus 32 minutes, 39 seconds and counting. Just working through some technical snafus on the back end here. Hoping to bring you the countdown timeline in just a moment. Meanwhile, as far as the countdown process is going, SpaceX should be about 2.5 minutes or so into the fueling process. Hopefully we'll get an update from SpaceX that they are, in fact, in fueling. But as far as a visual, what we're looking for, if you look near the base of the Falcon 9 rocket where the strung back starts to taper, you can see a slightly lighter gray ring around the base of the Falcon 9 first stage booster. That's about where we start to see some frost form and some vapor as the super cold liquid oxygen is loaded on board the Falcon 9 first stage. As fueling begins, they load that locks on board the first stage as well as RP1 or rocket-grade kerosene onto the first and second stages of the vehicle. We're now at T-minus 30 minutes and counting. Taking a closer look here at the Falcon 9 rocket, it does appear that there is some vapor in the area I was talking about, so it appears that fueling has in fact begun. Hopefully we'll get word from SpaceX as well confirming that. Do have tracking assistance this afternoon from our friend Pete Karsten, so as Pete is aligning his camera, we should be able to get an even closer view of the Falcon 9 rocket in just a moment here. At this point in the fueling process, SpaceX is also in the process of loading cryogenic helium on board the pressure vessels on the first stage. The helium is used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. They'll do the same process starting at about T-minus 25 minutes on the second stage. Alright, we have worked out the user error bug on the back end, so we'll go ahead and step through the countdown timeline here. As mentioned, the go-ahead for the start of prop load is given at T-minus 38 minutes or thereabouts. Propellant load began at T-minus 35 minutes with the aforementioned RP1 or rocket-grade kerosene being loaded on board the first and second stages of the Falcon 9 rocket. At the same time, that LOX began flowing on board the first stage. T-minus 16 minutes, second stage LOX load begins, but before that happens, we'll see the so-called big vent from the strong back as the feed lines are chilled at the pad. T-minus 7 minutes, the chill down of the 9 Merlin 1D engines gets underway. It involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps and helps protect the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. About 6 minutes out, the first stage kerosene tank should be full. Then at T-minus 4.5 minutes, we'll see the strong back retract begin from the Falcon 9 rocket. The strong back, or the transporter erector, will recline about 1.5 degrees away from the vehicle. It stays in that position until liftoff. At that point, the strong back will pull back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. About 2 minutes out, liquid oxygen load should be complete. At that point, the Falcon 9 is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers. The propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. 45 seconds out, the SpaceX launch director will give their go for liftoff. The engine ignition command is issued at T-minus 3 seconds. And if all 9 Merlin 1D engines ignite and are healthy. The flight computer will give the command for the hold down clamps to release the bird for a T0 liftoff, again targeting 7:16 p.m. Eastern, 23:16 UTC. And with fueling underway, SpaceX is committing to that T0 liftoff at 7:16 tonight. We're getting some punched-in views from our friend Pete Carstens with Max Q Productions, and you can see much more clearly in this shot the vapor forming around the Falcon 9 first stage booster. Thank you, Pete, for this view. Happens as the super cold densified liquid oxygen is loaded on board the Falcon 9 first stage, and it's much colder temperatures meet the comparatively much warmer Florida air. As we're now about T-minus 25 minutes, just a little bit before there. Again, at this point, they're loading cryogenic helium, or will start loading cryogenic helium momentarily onto the storage tanks on board the Falcon 9's second stage. There, of course, you're seeing the payload fairings at the top of the rocket, which are encasing and protecting the 11 spacecraft on board this Bandwagon-1 mission. Just as a rundown of the payloads here, we have Korea's 425 sat, part of its Project 425 synthetic aperture radar constellation. We've got 6 satellites from Hawkeye 360, clusters 8 and 9. Each cluster contains 3 satellites apiece. Tyvek International's Centauri 6 satellite, a Japanese company, IQPS, and its QPS SAR-7 or Tsukuyomi 2 satellite. Got another SAR satellite on here from Capella Space, which is Capella 14. And a company based in India, Tata Advanced System Limited's TSAT 1A satellite. Again, likely due to the sensitivity of the 425 sat, SpaceX is going to be cutting its camera feeds of this mission after booster landing over at landing zone 1, so we will not be getting views of spacecraft deployment this afternoon. But we will bring you live views throughout this process for as long as we can see the Falcon 9 first and second stages. We will be tracking that. And again, as a reminder, if you were not here for me mentioning this earlier, the booster will return to land at landing zone 1. So if you are in the central Florida area, especially if you're along the Space Coast, you may very well hear a sonic boom as the Falcon 9 first stage comes back in through the atmosphere for a land landing. Worth noting as well, this will be the 40th landing over at LZ-1, the 50th landing in Florida to date, and the 294th Falcon booster landing in total. We're now T-minus 22 minutes, 16 seconds and counting, just a couple minutes away from the start of the so-called big vent. Conditioning the feed lines ahead of second stage LOX load. now T-minus 20 minutes, 44 seconds and counting. As we close up on the big vent here, want to thank a few more folks for their support this evening in our live coverage. Want to thank channel member Christopher Jones for a $2 super chat. Thank you so much, Christopher. Good to see you this evening. John Donadio for a $10 super chat. Thank you so much, John. Danny Naranjo. Apologies, Danny, if I mispronounced your last name, but thank you so much for a $2 super chat, and hello to you there in Denver. There are T-minus 19 minutes, 36 seconds and counting. We're about almost a minute past the point where we normally see the big vent from the strong back. Pete's guiding his camera toward the... Oh, there we go. All right, so... the big vent is underway as they are thermally conditioning the feed lines ahead of prop load here. You can tell which direction the wind is blowing today, coming practically straight toward us with this big vent. Get a close-up view from our friend Pete Carsons with Max Q Productions here. And with the addition of some updated information about the T0 here, we're just adjusting our countdown clock here. We're making this adjustment based off of the timing of the big vent here, which is still underway. Currently at T-minus 18 minutes, 13 seconds and counting. A couple minutes left on this before it wraps up. As we close in on the end of the big vent, want to thank a few more folks for their support this evening. Robert Snow, channel member, gifting 5 Spaceflight Now memberships. Thank you so much, Robert. Really appreciate that. Richard Cochran also gifting 5 Spaceflight Now memberships. I'm sensing a theme or a pattern here, as channel members Rick Donner and Nelson Reyes both gifting 5 Spaceflight Now memberships apiece. Thank you so much to both Rick and Nelson. And if you are one of our newest 20 channel members, first off, welcome aboard. Glad to have you with us. Be sure to thank either Robert, Richard, Rick, or Nelson in the live chat if you haven't already. Our thanks also to Charles McMahon for a $10 super chat saying thanks for the terrific coverage as the big vent is wrapping up here at the pad. T-minus 14 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. I want to thank channel member Josh King for a $5 super chat and a good question here, asking why does SpaceX sometimes fly a smaller, he says, or shorter engine nozzle on the Falcon 9 second stage? Well, it has to do in part with cost savings and partly to do with performance. It's cheaper to manufacture a shorter engine nozzle as you're using less material, but you can also get better performance with a longer nozzle. So if SpaceX doesn't need the full performance of the longer nozzle, as we've seen them use on Starlink launches as recently as yesterday evening, and they can get away with a shorter nozzle, they will. I don't believe we've heard yet if they're going to be flying the short nozzle today or not, but I suspect they might. But we will wait and see just a little less than 14 minutes from now. Cappy Cross channel member with a $5 super chat saying Cap in Hudson, Florida, saying thanks as usual for all what you do. Thank you, Cappy. Thank you so much to Luis Culp for a $5 super chat. Ace Combat with a $2 super chat asking for a little eclipse chat. I suppose we can talk a little eclipse as NASA has provided a lovely graphic here on their countdown clock. Unfortunately, because we do have some other duties here at the Cape, a number of us are not going to be able to head to the path of totality. But if you are able to get into that path, which will sweep up in the United States from Texas through the northeastern states, highly, highly encourage you to do so. And just remember that the difference between totality at 100% or 99%, the para-umbra, I believe it's called, is, as one astrophysicist noted, 1,000 times less impressive. So if you have the opportunity to get to totality, you will experience a whole different sensation, sights, sounds than you will just outside of the path of totality. And there's a pretty good swath of the country that will be able to experience that. So if you have the chance to do so, don't miss out on this chance. The next big eclipse sweep across the country isn't going to come until 2044 So if you want to wait that long, you got another 20 years in you, feel free to do so. But now is a great opportunity if you have the time and the resources to make it out. We're now T minus 11 minutes, 5 seconds and counting. Should be getting some views momentarily from SpaceX as well. And again, we'll be listening into them to let you know about any relevant callouts as far as the fueling process and any updates on this mission. Currently T minus 8 minutes, 32 seconds and counting from the planned liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket. SpaceX is about a little over a minute away from the chill down of the 9 Merlin 1D engines here at the pad. SpaceX noting again that they are going to be ending their camera views at booster landing. Our T-minus 6 minutes, 40 seconds and counting. While we still have some time before liftoff, let's go ahead and step back in time and talk about the flight history of this first stage booster. It is going to be making its 14th flight today. This booster started with its first flight. It was a Starlink mission back on May 14th of 2022, sending up 53 version 1.5 Starlink satellites into orbit. That was followed up by a C-band communication satellite for SES-22 on June 29th. Next up was a pair of Starlink missions. The first, Starlink 4-26 on August 10th, and 4-35 on September 24th. That was followed by this booster's first lunar supporting mission with the launch of the iSpace Hakuto R lunar lander on December 11th. Of course, the launch went off as planned, but unfortunately the lander crash landed on the moon. That was followed up on February 7th, 2023 with the Amazonas Nexus satellite, Spanish communication satellite for Hispasat, covers the Americas, Europe, and North Africa. It was followed by a flight to the International Space Station with the Commercial Resupply Services, or CRS-27 launch on March 15th. And then every mission thereafter were Starlink flights up until now, of course. Those were Group 6-2 on April 19th, Group 5-11 on June 12th, 6-12 on September 4th, 6-27 on November 8th, 6-37 on January 15th, and 6-41 on March 4th. Which of course brings us to today and the launch of Bandwagon-1. 11 different satellites on board. Strong back retract sequence getting underway here. So the clamp arms will be opening up, and the transport erector, or the strong back, will recline away to green half away from the Falcon 9 rocket, stay in that position until liftoff. You see the clamp arms opening up. Here's some views from our friend Pete Carstens of the transporter erector tilted away from the Falcon 9 rocket. We're now just a little over 3 minutes away from the planned liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket. We're coming up on the conclusion of first stage liquid oxygen load just a few seconds from now. Apologies for the glitch here. We're now about 2.5 minutes away. Want to thank the more than 42,000 of you who are watching live with us this evening as we are looking forward to a great launch of the Falcon 9 rocket in just a little over 2 minutes from now. If you haven't already, be sure to hit the like button, allow some more folks to find their way in as we're coming up on the final 2 minutes of the count. And we will come back to our support here in the live chat on the other side of the mission. For now, though, as we're within the last couple minutes, we'll keep our focus here on the Falcon 9 rocket itself. And we do have confirmation that the Falcon 9 is now fully fueled with 1 million pounds of propellant. Now a minute and a half away from liftoff. That venting we're just seeing is the ground gas closeouts. One of the final steps before they're ready for flight. Coming up on the final minute for launch here. We're now less than a minute away, just standing by for a call that we are go for launch from the launch director. Falcon 9 is in autonomous startup, now 30 seconds. And we have confirmation we are go for launch. 18 seconds remaining. And here we go. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition and liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket. Nearly sunset as this Falcon 9 ascends from Historic Launch Complex 39A. Now 15 seconds into flight. Getting some great views from our tracking team here. Let's listen to the roar of those 9 Merlin 1D engines. Little over a minute into flight, we're hearing nominal power and telemetry. So far, a good flight of the Falcon 9 rocket. Rocket passing through max Q, the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. Now, we're coming up on a few different events in rapid succession. We'll see first stage management cutoff for MECO about 2 minutes and 14 seconds into flight. That'll be followed a few seconds later by stage separation, second stage engine start, and then the beginning of the boost back burn, as again this booster is going to be making its way back down towards a landing at landing zone 1. Here's some on-view camera views from the Falcon 9 first stage. Some views from our tracker here on the ground. And our friend Pete Carsons with Max Q Productions. As you see MECO. Stage separation. We're seeing the great shot of that flip maneuver here and the start of that boost back burn. Just incredible views from the ground. A little over 3 minutes into flight now. We should see fairing deployment in about 10 seconds on the SpaceX feed. Some great views from Pete Carsons here. We did hear confirmation of fairing separation. No views of that today, again, because of the sensitivity of some of the payloads on board. That boost back burn has ended. Those bursts that you're seeing, though, are the cold gas thrusters as the booster's attitude is being adjusted. Here's some views of that process here from the SpaceX onboard cameras. You can see the hypersonic grid fins deploying now, helping to provide stability and steering as the booster is making its way back down from whence it came practically, making its arrival back on Florida's Space Coast, coming up for a landing at Landing Zone 1 in just about 3 minutes. About 4.5 minutes into flight. We're just about a minute away now from the start of the first stage entry burn beginning. So far, a nominal flight of the Falcon 9 first stage as well as the second stage. Some great views given the time of day and the sunlight, really helping to illuminate the Falcon 9 first stage booster. A little over 5 minutes into flight now, less than about 30 seconds away from the start of that first stage entry burn beginning. Taking a look briefly from the SpaceX onboard cameras, you can see some of the cloud cover that the Falcon 9 came through just a few minutes ago. And a view from inside the Falcon 9 first stage. Coming up on the start of the entry burn momentarily. We should be seeing the entry burn start. There's the entry burn. Coming a little bit later in the timeline than what was previously advertised. No word from SpaceX that things are off nominal, though, right now. So it appears to have been a good entry burn. Now a little over 7 minutes into flight. According to the timeline, we should be coming up on first stage landings, so things happening just a little bit off from the advertised timeline. Now 7.5 minutes into flight, we should see the start of the landing burn shortly. Some great shots here, and there's the start of the landing burn. A little bit of a wider shot of that landing burn. Here's the same coming in from the SpaceX feed. And we just heard the sonic boom here at the press site. The landing legs deployed. It looks like we've got a good touchdown of the Falcon 9 first stage. This was the 14th landing of tail number B1073. This was the 294th SpaceX booster landing to date. A beautiful liftoff and landing as the first stage booster stands tall at landing zone 1, a little over 9 minutes into flight. And again, because of the sensitivity of the payload, SpaceX is not going to be providing views of spacecraft deployment today. And with that, we're going to go ahead and come to our mission stats in just a moment. But before we do, of course, we want to thank the people who helped make this live launch coverage possible. We very much appreciate you being with us and helping support us this evening. So our thanks to SG for a $5 super chat. Thank you so much, SG. Good to see you this evening. Air Force Proud 95 with a $5 super chat as well. Air Force saying, love the channel. Please wish Michelle a happy half birthday. Michelle, a very happy half birthday to you. Jason Huey with a $10 super chat. Thank you, Jason. Jason says he is living in Hawaii now, asking if he will ever see a launch this way. Well, maybe not necessarily a launch, but you may see a splashdown, depending on what the visibility looks like. SpaceX may decide to return its flight path to mirror what they did with the Flight 1 and 2 missions of Starship. In that case, they were intending to have the ship upper stage splash down north of Hawaii in the Pacific Ocean. And so there's a possibility that if they use that trajectory again, that you may see a Starship streak across the sky, which could be quite impressive depending on the time of day and the visibility at that point. Our thanks also to Tave for a very generous $20 super chat. Thank you so much, Tave. Really appreciate your support at that level. Tave says, hello from Philly. The kids Logan and Eva are watching. Hello, Logan and Eva. So glad you could all be with us this evening. Hope you enjoyed the launch. And hope you get a chance to enjoy the eclipse tomorrow as well. Mark Powell, the $2 super chat. Thank you so much, Mark, for your support this evening. And Mark Powell, shortly thereafter, joining with channel membership at the pad leader level. Really appreciate that additional support, Mark, and welcome to our community here at Spaceflight Now. Support from a couple other channel members. Janine with a $2 super chat. Thank you, Janine. Same with Space Nerd with a $1 super chat. Thank you, Space Nerd. Mel Roberts Harold saying, not the usual message I leave here, but I do have to take the opportunity to make my eldest daughter blush as she is watching. Well, hello to Mel and to her daughter there. Won't overly embarrass you here on the stream. Callistia Lee with a $20 super chat. Thank you, Callistia. Says this never gets old. Thank you, Will, Mods, and all of Spaceflight Now for bringing us this amazing coverage. We appreciate all of you. Well, thank you, Callistia, for your ongoing support. One of our other channel members, I'm Lita with a $5 super chat. Good to see you this evening, Lita. Saying thanks again for providing us with great coverage. Love my Spaceflight Now family. Hello, Will. Hello, Lita. And last but not least, Jonathan Roger with a $5 super chat from Australia, saying Australia had its first rocket launch this year, or has its first rocket launch this year, asking if we're going to cover that. Well, I would love to say that we're going to hop a plane and head down to Australia for that mission. We will certainly look at the dates for when that launch is going to happen, and I believe it is an orbital launch attempt, which is mostly what we cover here on Spaceflight Now and certainly on the channel. So If it is an orbital launch, I think we will look at our coverage options. So be sure to check out our socials, and we will let you know. But thanks for making sure that is on our radar, Jonathan. And Mary Beth Campo with a $2 super chat as well. Thank you, Mary. And with that, and with a successful liftoff and landing of the first stage booster, let's go ahead and pivot toward our mission stats as they currently stand tonight. This was the 14th flight of Falcon 9 booster 1073 in the SpaceX fleet, the 320th Falcon 9 launch to date. This was SpaceX's 35th Falcon 9 launch of 2024 so far, really racking them up. This was SpaceX's 264th Falcon booster reflight, or the launch of a booster that has flown at least once. This was the 36th SpaceX launch of 2024, including the third integrated flight test of Starship from Southern Texas, the 307th orbital launch in the last 365 days. This was the 80th orbital launch from this pad, and the 173rd overall orbital launch from Pad 39A. Worth noting as well, SpaceX is getting very close to tying the total number of space shuttle launches from this pad. That record still holds at 82, but we're getting very close to SpaceX tying and then surpassing that. Moving on with the bar chart, this is where we stand for SpaceX Falcon flights this year. Again, we're not going to see our first Falcon Heavy launch until potentially June 25th. That'll be the launch of the NOAA NASA satellite GOES-U, an important weather observing satellite used by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA. Again, that's launching no earlier than June 25th. There will be one other Falcon Heavy launch scheduled for this year. That is NASA's Europa Clipper mission, heading to the moon of Jupiter of the same name. That's set to launch in October. Moving on to some recovery stats. This was the 40th landing over at Landing Zone 1. SpaceX's 50th land landing in the Sunshine State. This is their 66th land landing overall when you include the landings over in California. And as previously mentioned, this was the 294th overall booster landing to date. Finally, with some industry stats, we have this as the 24th orbital launch from Florida in 2024, the 37th orbital launch from U.S. soil, the 40th orbital launch from a U.S. rocket company, including the 3 from Rocket Lab, and the 67th orbital launch globally. With a couple of unfortunate failures on the year so far, this is where the pie chart stands. U.S. coming back up to 60% of all launches on the year, driven, of course, largely by SpaceX. And with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up. But before we do, I'd like to remind you of the next launch you can catch here on the channel. We are tracking the launch of the Delta IV Heavy rocket. Again, this will be the finale of 60-plus years of the Delta family of rockets. That's set to lift off from Pad 37 over at Cape Canaveral, coming up on Tuesday morning, or Tuesday early afternoon. We'll have live launch coverage of that right here on the channel. And then we're looking forward to another Falcon 9 launch that's coming up on the 10th. That'll be the Starlink 6-48 mission. And you can always hop on over to our launch schedule over on our website, spaceflightnow.com, for the latest on orbital launches from the U.S. and others around the world. Want to thank the folks that helped make this live launch coverage possible. Our thanks to our wonderful moderators in the live chat, Astro Jen, Astro Joe, Stephanie B, Rusty Shackelford. Thanks to all of you. Our thanks also to our friend Pete Carsons with Max Q Productions for helping to provide some stellar coverage of liftoff and landing today. Our thanks, as always, to our fellas behind the lens, Adam Bernstein, Michael Kane. If you're not already following them on X, you can find them here at their handles, MD Kane Jr. for Michael, A Burn NYC for Adam, and Spaceflight now, of course, is on X as well as Threads and Facebook, and where you're watching right now on YouTube. Our thanks, as always, to our editor, Stephen Young, for helping provide technical support behind the scenes here on this mission. I want to thank a few more folks that came in at the buzzer on the live chat with a little more support this evening. Thanks to Mary Beth Campo for $2 super chat. Thank you, Mary Beth. Suzanne Hatcher joining us with channel membership at the pad leader level. Welcome aboard, Suzanne. Glad to have you with us. $10 super chat from Mel, saying in all seriousness, a huge thank you to Will. The incredible photographers, our terrific moderators that keep Spaceflight Now a nice place to gather, enjoy, and be educated. And yes, we couldn't do it without the whole team to make it happen. And finally, thanks to channel member Mitchell Wilbur for a $10 super chat as well. So got here late to the party. Good thing you guys are here. And if you happen to miss any of the action or know a friend who did so, you can always send this live stream to them. Tell them what time to start watching as far as the launch itself if they want to go ahead and skip to all the action. Our live coverage always lives here on YouTube at any time for your convenience. Most of all, want to thank you at home for spending part of your evening with us. Thank you so much for flying the Spaceflight Now skies for your live launch coverage enjoyment and education, as Mel said. For all of us here at the Spaceflight Now team, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Be good to yourselves. Be good to others. We will see you next time. Again, Delta IV Heavy, the finale of the Delta rockets coming up on Tuesday. We will see you then. Good night.